Your dreams aren't dying of natural causes. They are being systematically murdered by a guest you invited into your home. Most of us are currently standing in the middle of a lush, fertile valley of potential, wondering why we feel like we are suffocating. It isn't a lack of talent, and it isn't a lack of luck. It's something far more sinister, a silent, invisible parasite that feeds on the phrase, "not today." This is the autopsy of a wasted life and the blueprint for a resurrection. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of being meant for more, while doing absolutely nothing to achieve it, you need to see what happened to Ethan. Because his story isn't just a fable. It is a mirror reflecting the current state of your soul. In the heart of the Emerald Basin, a land where the soil was so dark and rich it looked like crumbled obsidian, lived a young man named Ethan. To the passing traveler, Ethan looked like the archetype of success. He was broad-shouldered, with eyes that held the sharp clarity of a hawk and a mind that functioned like a master clock. He lived on the most fertile acre in the entire basin, a piece of land so vibrant that seeds seemed to jump out of the hand just to touch the dirt. Ethan wasn't just a dreamer. He was a visionary architect. He spent his evenings on his porch, sketching elaborate blueprints for orchards that would yield fruit unknown to the region, and irrigation systems that were marvels of engineering. He could describe the exact scent of the blossoms and the specific weight of the harvest. He had the vision. He had the tools. But Ethan was a victim of the most dangerous drug known to man, the dopamine of the perfect tomorrow. To Ethan, the present was always a bit too gritty, a bit too hot, or a bit too inconvenient. He spent his days sharpening his tools until the steel was thin, waiting for the ideal climate to begin his masterpiece. He didn't see the rust forming in the microscopic pits of his plow. He didn't notice the burlap sacks of seeds in his cabin beginning to smell of dry rot. He was so busy planning his empire that he didn't notice the silence of his fields. One morning, a figure emerged from the morning mist. It was Gordon, a man whose skin was so weathered and scarred it looked like the bark of an ancient oak. Gordon didn't just farm. He coexisted with the earth. His hands were permanently hooked into the shape of a shovel handle, and his presence felt like the heavy stillness before a storm. Gordon walked to Ethan's porch and produced a small leather pouch. Inside were 2 seeds. The first was the ambition seed. It shimmered with a faint, bioluminescent glow, looking as though it had captured a piece of the sun. The second was the laziness seed, a dull, pebble-like gray that seemed to absorb the light around it. "The ambition seed is a king," Gordon rasped, his voice sounding like stone grinding on stone. "It requires a throne of sweat and a crown of focus. If you neglect it for an hour, it weakens. If you doubt it for a second, it shrinks. But if you serve it, it will eventually build a world for you." He then pointed to the gray seed. "This is the usurper. It requires nothing. It hates the light. It feeds on your silence and your excuses. It grows in the dark corners where you hide your fears. And once it takes root, it creates a shade so cold that no dream can survive." Ethan, filled with a sudden surge of day one energy, planted the shimmering seed in the center of his field. He even tossed the gray seed into the corner, arrogant enough to think he could outrun it. For 3 days, Ethan was a titan. He carried water until his palms bled. He sang to the earth. But on the 4th day, a gray drizzle began to fall. Ethan looked out and thought, "The rain will water it for me. I deserve a break." He stayed inside. He brewed tea. He sat in his chair and felt a warm, heavy comfort. That was the invitation the gray seed needed. While the ambition seed struggled against the flooding silt, the gray seed sent out a root as thin as a hair. Within a week, Ethan had found 5 more reasons to stay inside a book, a slight headache, a visit from a neighbor. Every time he said later, the gray seed said now. By the 2nd month, the lethargy vines had appeared. They were beautiful at first, soft, mossy, and pleasant to walk on. They didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a carpet. But as Ethan retreated further into his cabin, to avoid the growing guilt of his untended field, the vines began to change. They grew thick as pythons, covered in translucent thorns that leaked a numbing sap. They began to crawl toward the cabin. They didn't just take over the land, they took over Ethan's mind. He started gaslighting himself, claiming he was resting, or waiting for a better season. He stopped looking out the windows. He shuttered the house. He lived in a self-imposed tomb of someday. The breaking point arrived not as a sudden realization, but as the smell of stagnant water and rotting potential. Ethan tried to open his front door, but it wouldn't budge. The vines had sealed the frame. They were pressing against the glass, their thorns scratching like the nails of a ghost. He looked across the valley and saw Gordon's farm. It was a cathedral of life, vibrant and screaming with color. Ethan looked at his own hands. They were soft, white, and trembling. He realized with a jolt of pure terror that his comfort was actually a slow-motion execution. He didn't have a shovel anymore. It was buried under 10 feet of thorns. He didn't have a plan. He only had his bare hands and a scream of feral rage. He threw himself into the thorns. The first day was a massacre. The vines tore his skin, and the numbing sap tried to put his will to sleep. His mind screamed at him to go back inside, to wait for a better tool, to try again when he was stronger. But Ethan finally understood the cosmic joke. Strength isn't what you bring to the fight. Strength is what you earn by staying in it. He worked until the moon rose, and then he worked by the light of the stars. He didn't clear the field with a grand gesture. He cleared it 1 square inch at a time. He learned that the vines of laziness have a hollow core. They look invincible, but they cannot withstand the sustained, focused heat of a human who has decided to live. He bled into the soil, and the soil, recognizing the price of greatness, began to yield. When he finally reached the center, he found the ambition sprout. It was a pathetic, withered twig. He didn't just water it, he became its guardian. He slept in the dirt beside it. He protected it from the wind with his own body. As Ethan's calluses grew, the tree's bark thickened. As Ethan's discipline hardened, the tree's roots deepened. He stopped looking for the perfect time and started making the time perfect through the sheer force of his labor. Decades later, travelers didn't talk about the farmer's talent. They talked about the tree of iron. It was the tallest structure in the basin, with leaves that stayed green in the dead of winter. Ethan was no longer a dreamer. He was a master of his own landscape. He lived in the shade of the discipline he had once tried to avoid. Eating the fruit of the days, he chose to bleed when he wanted to sleep. The usurper was still there, a tiny gray seed waiting in the corner of every man's field, but it no longer had power over Ethan, because Ethan knew that the only way to kill a parasite is to starve it of your excuses. Today, I want you to look at your own field. Identify the one lethargy vine that is currently blocking your door, the one excuse you use to justify your perfect tomorrow. Don't wait for a shovel or a better season. Go out and pull 1 inch of that vine today. It will hurt, it will draw blood, and your mind will tell you to stop. Do it anyway. If this story hit a nerve, it's because your ambition seed is still alive under the thorns. Subscribe to join a community of people who are tired of being strangled by their own potential. Drop a comment below with the one task you've been putting off. Declaring it here is your first square inch of progress.